I have no regrets about being angry about that because people were dying. It wasn't a time to be high-fiving about, you sure got them on that. No doubt about it. Hardest part in life, what time is it?
From coast to coast to coast. These are our stories. This is the VCalla Show, presented by CrossCut Digital Strategies.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the VCalla Show, presented by CrossCut Digital Strategies. I'm Vincenzo, Calla, creator of VCalla Productions, and today I'm sitting here with MP Frank Caputo, member for Kamloops, Thompson, Nicola, British Columbia. Thank you, MP Caputo, for your time. Thanks for having me in your office, and welcome to the VCalla Show.
Great, and you can call me Frank. Can I call you Enzo?
Sure. Sure.
Okay.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for coming on. I've followed your work for quite a few years. Followed along, so I'm very happy to have this going for today. Thanks for coming on, and we're just going to start with, you're also the Conservative Shadow Minister for Public Safety, I want to mention, and if we can get into it a little later, we'll discuss that. But for my audience, whenever I interview an MP or any figure for the first time, I always like to give the floor to you at the beginning to just tell the audience a little bit about who you are. What's the Frank Caputo story?
What's the Frank Caputo story? Okay, well, that's a very good question. First thing I talk about is my background. My parents came to Canada in 1957 and 1961, respectively. They actually met in Kamloops. That's where I was born and raised. I always say I was born there, I will probably die there. It's one of those things that it's my home and I will always be there. I have two sisters, both of whom are older and teachers. I like to joke that they're much older because they always say that I look like I'm the oldest. It's the whole hair thing, unfortunately. Born and raised in Kamloops, as I said. After I was done high school, I went on to have an undergraduate degree from Simon Fraser University in criminology. Then I went to law school, have a Bachelor of Laws with distinction from the University of Saskatchewan. It's there that I met my wife, and we have children as well. She's also a lawyer, mostly does work in the community, nonprofit work, so she doesn't charge for her services. After I had been practicing law for a couple of years, I did a Master's of Law for a year at the University of Alberta. And subsequent to that, I did a little bit of work in the private sector in criminal law, and then I became a Crown prosecutor in 2012. Started teaching at the university, Thompson Rivers University, in I believe it was 2012 as well, and taught in the faculties of business, sociology, and law. And I was Crown counsel, mostly focusing on internet offenses against kids up until my election in 2021. My off time when I was a little younger, I was quite into mountain biking. Can't really do that now that I'm elected. It's a little busier, and also volunteered in my Italian Cultural Center.
So what brought you to Parliament? In 2021 you ran. It was a pandemic election. Mm-hmm. I remember I was working on that campaign, and it wasn't...
Not my campaign.
Not your campaign.
Yeah.
I was working in the sort of national campaign,
yeah.
and my local candidate, and it was an interesting election. How was that to come in during the pandemic election, win, and start in 2021?
Difficult.
Yeah.
I look back, we all were wearing masks. It was a difficult time. It was a difficult time for everybody. Mental health wise, people were struggling. People were struggling with the fact that they couldn't see their loved ones. It was a really tough time. I wonder if my kids will remember it and just how much of a change it was. Once we started to see the easing of restrictions, it was just so much better to get back to normal.
Yeah, it was definitely a difficult time. I want to talk a bit about, before we start and head into the issues, I always like to give a local spotlight. Tell me about your riding, about the people in your riding, and some of the issues that are facing your riding that you bring to Parliament.
Certainly. Best riding in Canada. We'll look right to the camera and say that. Best riding in Canada. Kamloops, Thompson, Nicola it's quite a diverse riding. So we have 15 different communities in a riding that is just about the size of Costa Rica. Bigger than Slovenia, almost as big as Costa Rica. So if you can imagine how big that is, well, it's really big. those 15 communities, it's not like they go up one road. The riding is like in the shape of a big S, if you will. And Kamloops is just right on the edge, because I have the western part of Kamloops, and then the eastern part of Kamloops is with Mel Arnold. So beyond that S, you kind of can go 2 to 3 hours north, and then you can go 2 to 3 hours southwest. So the radius of the riding is huge. To do a full riding tour where I hit most of the communities, even not all, probably takes 3 or 4 days when we talk about meetings and things like that. We also have 20, I believe it's 29 First Nations and 2 regional districts. So one of the biggest challenges for me is meeting everybody. People have diverse needs because we have the urban center of Kamloops, and then we have the rural areas around the riding. The people are hardworking. They're like my dad was. My dad was a sawmill worker when he came from Italy. He did that right up until retirement. So a lot of people doing labor industry is a very important aspect. Very hardworking people. The railroads employ a lot of people. They employed actually both of my grandfathers when they came from Italy. We also have a few major employers in Kamloops: BC Lotteries Corporation, the university, the city. Tourism is increasingly bigger. We actually call ourselves in Kamloops, the city itself calls itself the tournament capital of Canada. So we've hosted the Memorial Cup, the Scotties, the Brier, events like that. So we have you could say you could fish in a different lake every day of the year in Kamloops. So beautiful outdoors. We have Harper Mountain, Sun Peaks, our ski destinations and mountain biking destinations. The riding actually mimics the landscape of Afghanistan. And I know that because that's where the troops trained back in the day. And actually one of my friends is from Afghanistan, and he settled in Kamloops. And the reason was he was driving through Canada after arriving. He stopped in Kamloops, called his wife and said, "This looks like home and feels like home." And he's been doing well ever since.
That's really interesting. I never knew that about the Kamloops area. That's really interesting. Is there a big Italian population in that area?
There's a fair amount. The North Shore of Italy, the North Shore of Kamloops, where I grew up, is fairly Italian. In fact, I'm thinking back to our neighbors, and we had an alleyway back then, and across the way were Italians. Then next to them were Italians, and then next to them were Italians. So, and where my grandparents lived, lots of Italians as well. So huge. In terms of challenges, there are different challenges throughout the riding. Housing, infrastructure, those are really big. Crime has become a really big issue in Kamloops as well. Those are the things I hear about the most. I hear about all sorts of different things, but those are probably the big 3 on the federal level.
Absolutely, and if we have time after, we'll wade into some of those issues, especially pertaining to your shadow minister role. But right now, I want to talk about your private members bill that you're coming up on, Bailey's Law. I know that it's a very important piece of legislation that you've been working hard on. Can you tell my audience a little bit about what Bailey's Law is, what you've done, and how much more you need to do before that can be passed into law?
Sure, that's a great question. Now, I'll start back in, I think it was 2023. When I was a prosecutor, I prosecuted all sorts of offenses, from shoplifting to murder, with a focus on internet offenses against kids. But one of the things that always really bothered me was the law of assault. If you punch somebody out at the bar or abuse your intimate partner, it's actually the exact same charge in the criminal code. But they're very different offenses. One is done in a situation of trust, behind closed doors, often with financial dependencies and things like that. So it's not just a matter of people who are abused in intimate relationships. They often don't feel like they can't leave because they might not be the primary breadwinner of the family. They may make substantially less than their partner. And that's why we actually see the cycle of violence. As a prosecutor, we used to probably have one person a day come to the office and say, "I want to drop charges," not realizing that it's the Crown that drops charges. And you would hear all sorts of different things, different rationalizations, it won't happen again, or that type of thing. So I always viewed my job there as having a significant rehabilitative element. I would talk to victims. Sometimes you have to literally play 911 tape and say, like, "Look, this is what happened. Like, it's something happened. Just listen to your voice. Listen to the screaming in the background." Because this stuff flies under the radar for so long. Intimate partner violence has flown under the radar for far too long, is how I felt. And most homicide victims, I believe, if you're to categorize them, the biggest category would be intimates. So I drafted this bill in 2023 or 2024. I didn't table it. And then in July of 2025, I won't mention his name, but he was convicted of abusing his intimate partner. Very serious offense. And he was not detained after that, as in he was free on bail still. Within 3 hours, he left the courthouse, prepared for a murder, and found his former spouse and killed her. Brutal, graphic killing. The fact that somebody could do this within 3 hours, it really hit me. It happened in Kelowna, which is about 2 hours away from where I live. I prosecuted a murder in Kelowna. I started my career, I didn't mention that in my introduction, I was a parole officer between my first 2 degrees. I was a parole officer in Kelowna. I got married in Kelowna. Kelowna is a community that means a lot to me. So hearing that, I thought, you know what, we need to change this. So then I tweaked the bill a little bit to add in a first-degree murder element for those who have been killed by intimate partners. That's actually something that the NDP premier said, and I said, well, if this is good enough for the NDP, it should be good enough for us, because generally we disagree on crime and on punishment and things like that. I introduced it in Parliament, and that's when some of Bailey McCourt's relatives contacted me. Bailey was the victim. I'm not sure if I mentioned her name yet. And Bailey's family contacted me, some of her family, and they said, can we please call this Bailey's Law? And I said, 100%, and they have been with me the whole time through. So it made it past second reading, which had some challenges. There were, if you were to go back and look at the speeches at second reading from the government, I was quite disappointed. We were able to right that ship with a lot of intervention, a lot of hard work, some of Bailey's family members coming out. Bailey's law passed second reading, and one of the most beautiful moments I've seen in the House was when it passed second reading. Some of Bailey's family members were in the gallery, and every MP turned. They were to my left and up. They turned and gave them a standing ovation, just spontaneously. It was a really beautiful moment. We just got through committee. We have some amendments, and we have a bill that's ready to pass. Write your MPs. Let's get this passed right away.
Well, and that's such an important piece of legislation. I'll tell you, I wasn't too familiar with the bill until your staff sort of gave me a mini briefing on what it was all about. Mm-hmm. And it's such an important issue. Although I didn't know the bill itself or the specifics of this situation, I'm familiar with the increasing problem this is in Canada. And maybe we'll get into a little bit about that later when we talk more broadly about your shadow cabinet portfolio, but it's a part of an unfortunate pattern in Canada where we're having more and more crime, more and more violent crime in some of the most intimate areas, even in people's homes. Mm-hmm. And like you said, there was this soft on crime sort of policy to this man who went and took the final step, which was absolutely terrible and horrible to hear about. So I'm glad you're bringing this forward, because this is something that from coast to coast to coast is an issue in this country. It's
a huge issue. You know, sometimes we can get sanitized with these things. It's something I felt as a prosecutor, it's another fill in the blank. It's another sex offense against a child, or it's another homicide, or another choking of a victim. And when we don't put, faces, names, voices, if you don't know that, we can become desensitized as a society and as people, just because we're just hearing about this. There are real people who are victims, children who are victims. I always say voices to the voiceless, names to the nameless, faces to the faceless. Well, here we have a name, we have a face in the form of Bailey McCourt. She leaves behind her mother, Karen. She leaves behind her father, Shane, her stepmom, Trish, her aunt, Deb. These are people. And then you've got the person who was actually in the vehicle with Bailey when this happened, Carrie, another victim. These things have reverberating effects, and they are, after a couple of days, they're out of the spotlight. The news cycle has moved on, but those people are going to live with Bailey's death and all she went through. And if it hadn't been for her death, even with her victimization, those things, they have reverberating effects and consequential effects down the road. It's so important we call these things out. That's the other reason I focused on internet offenses against kids. Those children who are victimized, they're serving a psychological life sentence. It's time we recognize that.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. I want to shift gears a little bit to talking more broadly about your work in Parliament as the Conservative Shadow Minister for Public Safety. Ties into this a bit, but there's a lot of issues that are facing Canada right now. A lot of issues facing our justice system. You bring your experience as a former Crown prosecutor and someone who is very well versed in the legal system in Canada to your role. And I wanted to sort of give you an opportunity to talk about it. You know, I know the Conservative Party, this is becoming a major focus. It has been a major focus for a long time, continues to be a major focus. What are some of the things that you find most important that you're bringing to this role? And then maybe I'll spitball a few topics later, and
Sure.
then we'll discuss that in rapid fire.
Okay, sounds good. Well, when you want to look at what I care about or what I think, you can look at my private members' bills.
Yeah.
I tabled 4, well, technically 3.5 is the way I put it, last Parliament. So I wrote the bill to change the name of child pornography to child sexual abuse material, and that bill actually passed. Fortunately, in the order of precedence, I was like 180. But fortunately, that meant that my colleague and also Kamloops seatmate, Mel Arnold, was able to adopt the bill. That bill went through Parliament, and as a result, we do not use the term child pornography. I stood on doorsteps in Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou at that time and said, I will make this change if I go to Parliament, and we did. I put forward 2 bills on bail, one of which related to firearms. Last Parliament, and then I put a bill forward to change the maximum sentence to life imprisonment for most sex offenses. A lot of people don't know that a lot of property offenses have a maximum sentence of life. It doesn't mean you go to jail for life, but that's how long you could go to jail for. So sex offenses, inviolability of the body, offending the body, as opposed to property offenses. Property offenses sometimes have a longer sentence. So those are some of the things that personally motivate me. We also have to listen to our people, Vincenzo in that, I call you Enzo. We also have to listen to our people who tell us, this is happening on our streets and we can't deal with it. So property crime, petty crime, it's actually having a huge impact. So crime in general is something that we've got to speak about. I think we've spoken about it enough because the Liberals finally tabled a bail bill. For years, they told us there was nothing wrong with bail. They're not saying that anymore. So I'm not sure if this is just kind of like another flip-flop or what that is. Interpersonal sexual offenses against kids, sexual offenses, period. I co-sponsored Rachel Thomas's bill, C-246, I believe, which the Liberals, by the sounds of it, are opposing. That is to have consecutive sentences for sex offenses. Like, this is a no-brainer to me. If you sexually assault one person and you sexually assault another, your sentence should be consecutive. You don't get a discount. We have what's called the totality principle that factors all of that in sentencing. I'll look at the camera. Write to your MPs about this. If you want to get enraged, listen to the speeches on Bill C-246. I gave, and I'm not sure if you saw this, but I gave one of the most impassioned speeches, no notes, that I've ever given when I heard the government's speech on C-246. I'm getting angry even thinking about it, that in a country like Canada, with this supposedly feminist government, that we are arguing about whether somebody who sexually assaults 5 people should go to jail with their criminal record reflecting consecutive time for every one of those. Am I in the Twilight Zone? Like, seriously. How is that? How are we even fighting against this? And the Liberals talked about, well, is this even constitutional? Well, we actually have a provision that says the same thing for sex offenses against kids. So, yeah, it's constitutional. Anyways, that's one of my things that we need to change, and I credit MP Rachel Thomas for bringing that forward. I support her fully on that.
Well, thank you for bringing that forward as well. This is a conversation that I think a lot more people are having. about crime is getting out of hand. It's touching every corner of our lives, whether you're in downtown Toronto, whether you're in Kamloops, whether you're in rural Saskatchewan, crime is happening. The types of crime is happening. The type of crime is different. But in your role, the public safety shadow minister, and every issue touches every person. And I'm gonna rapid fire three topics that you're focusing on, that the Conservatives are focusing on, that touch every part of Canada. The gun buyback program.
Yeah, very interesting. The gun confiscation is a very interesting file, because in a riding like mine, for instance, you have 29 First Nations, and there is a constitutional right, not something like a nice to have. This is a constitutional right to hunt for sustenance. That is something that can't be taken away. So I have to bear that in mind when I'm considering these things as well. In rural BC, you do have people who require firearms for protecting their livestock, things like that. So when it comes to hunting, for instance, I think we have to bear this in mind, because there are huge issues on this. The other aspect is that the minister himself doesn't even believe that this will work. They budgeted $742 million and not a dime more. The compensation model, I think I'm told, is flawed. I'm not a firearms owner. I'm just trying to look at this objectively. And as a former prosecutor, I could say we have people now who are committing gun crimes, not hunters, people who are committing gun crimes. And if you look at Bill C-5, the Liberals actually lowered sentences for those people. For drive-by shooters, people who did robbery with a firearm, people who did extortion with a firearm, you used to have to go to jail for 4 years for that, which is pretty standard. It should be. The Liberals actually said you could get house arrest for that. So on the one hand, they say, boy, we sure are tough on gun crime. And on the other, they say, well, you can play your video gaming system while you're serving your sentence in the community. I mean, you just can't have it both ways. I think this is going to be a boondoggle of epic proportions. We all want to deal with street gun crime. We just have different ways of looking at it. And I would urge the Liberals to address the street gun crime issue rather than through a program that the minister himself says won't work and is only for political optics. The time for political optics is done. Too many people are getting shot, too many innocent victims. It's time to focus on where the issues are.
And the final issue I want to bring up here, that's touching a lot more people in other areas as well, is auto theft.
Yes.
The thing that always sticks out to me was a couple years ago when the Toronto Police Service said, leave your keys on the front porch because you won't be violently attacked. That bothered me, and I still think about that very often.
When, this wasn't the Canada we had, where you had to worry about these things. Auto theft didn't have to be such a big deal, where, cars got stolen, but it wasn't a situation where people, particularly in Ontario, Quebec, where they had to worry about those things. Costco selling impediments to stealing people's cars. The ports are a major area of activity, and again, the government has done, I think, too little, too late. They haven't infiltrated organized crime. They haven't addressed the issue to deal with those things, because they are huge issues for Canadians. Again, might not sound like much when it's happening to someone else, but when it happens to you, it's a big deal.
Well, thank you for bringing all those topics up. I know we're almost out of time.
We are. Okay,
so
flies.
Time flies, and this could be a conversation that we could have. Maybe we'll do it again and touch on some more issues. But I always like to end my interview. I've been doing interviews since 2021 with many MPs, MPPs, elected officials, candidates. And something I always like to end on, because I'm a big youth audience, is asking for advice. Any advice that you want to give to people in politics, young people. What is your message to the people watching my program?
Okay, two things come to mind. Okay, one of the books, I read a number of books when I was around your age. I'm not sure exactly how old you are, but when I was around your age, I read a lot of books on leadership that really shaped me. One of the books I read was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. There's a teen version. I mean, this is going back 25 years ago that I read this book. But one of the things that it talked about is start with the end in mind and being proactive. So figure out where you want to go. If you want to be a police officer, you want to be an accountant, you want to be a truck driver, what are you doing in life to get you to that goal? and yeah, like not every second has to be about that goal. Not every second, I have a family, that comes first, before my career, before my politics, all of it. But one of the things I did that I think helped me get on this political journey is that from a fairly young age, it was in my heart that I wanted to get in politics. So I made decisions along the way that helped me do that. So I was thinking, how does this impact me professionally moving towards politics? Always start with the end in mind. Second thing, time. This is one thing I have learned, is that life is about timing, but politics is also about timing. Just because something is the right thing doesn't always make it the right time. So it might be great for you to go into a job, but that doesn't mean today is the right day. It might be, but it might not be. People in relationships would know that. This might be the person that you're going to marry. Doesn't mean you have to marry them after 2 months. You got to grow together, right? That's an example. There is a time for everything in politics as well. There is a time to be angry. There is a time to be cooperative. There is a time to be collegial. There's a time to be oppositional. And there is a time when you should criticize. The difficulty in politics is figuring out what time it is. If you watch the House of Commons, and I'm thinking of a member or two, they're always angry, like always. It's like, really? Are conservatives always that bad? Like, we have no good ideas, for instance. I'm just thinking about people who start their speeches with, why is it that conservatives ... Is it always the time to be righteously angry? And when I say righteously, I put that in air quotes. It's not always that time. There is a time to cooperate. There's similarly a time to be angry. I've gotten angry in the House. One of the times I got angry in the House was when some of the Liberals I thought were making light about Afghan interpreters. It wasn't on the record. It was just, they were talking about how our repatriation of Afghan interpreters wasn't in our platform. And I got angry because the reason it wasn't in our platform was because the Liberals called an election as Kabul was falling. I have no regrets about being angry about that, because people were dying. It wasn't a time to be high-fiving about, you sure got them on that. No doubt about it. Hardest part in life, what time is it?
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate our conversation today.
Thank you.
Thanks for hosting me in your beautiful office on Parliament Hill. Thanks for having us here. I'm very excited that we were able to finally do this. I know I've been communicating with your staff for quite a while, so I'm happy that we were able to do this. VCalla Show, I always like to give the final word to the guest. Any parting thoughts for today?
It is an honor, and that you would desire to sit down with me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Freddie. So thank you for watching today's episode. The VCalla Show is a VCalla production in cooperation with CrossCut Digital Strategies. So until the next interview, I'm Vincenzo, Calla, signing out.
Hey, thanks for making it to the end of this video. If you liked this one, you can find more by subscribing to me on YouTube, following all of my social media at VCalla Canada, and visiting my website, vincenzocalla.com, where you can also join my mailing list. So that's all for this video, and I will catch you in the next one.